Hi there. It's the 1st of September, and we conclude today our journey through the book of Job, Eov in Hebrew, one of the wisdom books, part of the writings, the Ketuvim, and we are looking at chapters 40 to 42. So God is speaking to Job, and he's taking Job to task. And he basically says to Job, Job, you're speaking without understanding. You may have reason, you're trying to reason it out, but actually you haven't got the full picture. And this is something that is the theme, really, of the whole of Job. As human beings, we have reason. God has given us reason, but even that reason cannot fathom everything. There are still things, there are still questions that we have. There are still things we can't do. As human beings, we find this so difficult to come to terms with. We depict ourselves as being in charge of everything. But having been corrected by God, and actually God having said, will you condemn me to make yourself look righteous? Will you make me look bad so you can look good? Job says, I put my hand over my mouth. I will be silent. I've spoken without really knowing what I'm talking about. And then God continues speaking to Job out of the whirlwind, and he brings more pictures of how human beings are not fully in charge of their destiny. And he takes two very beautiful pictures latterly, and the two pictures are taken from animals, they're taken from creatures that are powerful creatures, but they also have a mythical element to them. And the first one that is depicted is called in Hebrew behemoth, the beasts, or is what it really means. It can refer to cattle, but here it seems to be talking about the hippo, this powerful creature, or it could also be talking about the elephant, because it talks about it having something that flaps that is so strong. And the hippo doesn't have a big tail, but the elephant has something that flaps, which is its trunk. So we're not certain exactly which it is, but behemoth is also linked to a mythical creature, and these are great creatures in creation that man cannot overpower, that man doesn't have power over. And God is really speaking this to say, look, you can't even fully control the hippo or the elephant. It may be the hippo, because the hippo is a really dangerous creature, and it's very difficult for man to tame or train the hippo, whereas he could tame the elephant. But whichever it is, God is saying, look, you don't have even the capacity to train the hippo. And then he goes on in the chapter 41 to talk about the Leviathan, Leviathan we call him, and Leviathan's actually a word we use in our language to speak about something huge, something vast and powerful. It's probably talking about the crocodile, because the crocodile is one of those creatures feared by man, particularly in ancient times, difficult to approach, difficult to have any kind of power over. In fact, God says at one point, will you make a covenant with the crocodile? Will it serve you? But then again, it verges over, it tips over later in chapter 41 into a mythical creature that breathes fire and that leaves a trail in the sea, and there's this harking back to the ancient serpent of the depth. So there's kind of a bringing of them together. But really what God is saying to Job here is, look, you human beings do not have control over everything. You do not, although you have reason, you still have to trust that I know what I'm talking about, that I know what I'm doing. And actually the key thing is not reason, but faith. And the last analysis, it's only trust. It's only accepting that God is good, at the bottom of his being, that God is who he says he is, that God is a great creator, a powerful creator. Only as we stand in that place of humility and meekness will we really find our place in the whole cosmos. And in the last chapter, we find Job repents. He stands back from his having spoken without knowledge, without wisdom, and he takes that meek and humble place. And then an amazing thing happens. God then takes to task Job's three friends, who have been expounding and trying to explain how God works. And God says, no, you're wrong. You haven't understood me at all. And in fact, what I want you to do is I want you to take sacrifices, go and sacrifice, and Job will pray for you, and then I will rescue you. And so these friends go and they basically apologize to Job and to God that they have misunderstood who God is. Job prays for them, and then a beautiful thing happens. It says the fortunes of Job, the well-being of Job was changed around when he prayed for his friends. Even though he's been through so much, at the end of this story, Job is willing to pray for his friends. He's willing to put himself in a place of vulnerability for others. And at that point, God turns around the whole story. And Job has everything restored, and more than that. He has twice as much restored to him in terms of possessions, in terms of family. So much comes back to him. And at the end of the story, Job lives to a good old age, and it says he dies old and full of years. But there's one thing just to note at the end of Job. William Blake drew a very lovely picture, painted a lovely picture of Job and his family around him at the end. But there's something about the nature of Job, the character of Job, that is written in his face. Job has not, this hasn't taken away all the scars of Job. This happy ending, if you like, doesn't take away the reality of what Job has suffered. And this is one thing we learn from suffering, that suffering forms us and leaves its scars, but they don't have to be wounds. And at the end of the story, Job has been experienced. Job is formed. Job is deepened in wisdom, is really the final message. Job is deepened in wisdom. It's not just about getting his possessions back. He's deepened in wisdom and experience and formation through what he has been through. Job is a very challenging book, but it's a very beautiful book as well. It's in its poetry, in its depiction of creation, its depiction of God. And as we come to the end of this story of Job, we just need to recognize the formative way that God uses what happens to us. He doesn't make it happen to us. Remember, it was the adversary who put his hand on Job, not God. But God took everything that happened to Job and used it for his formation. We believe that we are being shaped through what we go through what we experience, just like Jesus was, into the image of Jesus, to be more and more like him. That's what God is up to. So if you are going today through storms and difficult places, know that God will not waste any of those experiences to shape and form you more into the likeness of Jesus. Have a very good September the 1st.